Commander Velterran stood before the obsidian war table, his scaled fingers drumming against its surface with the patience of a predator who knew victory was inevitable. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a small blue-green planet spinning lazily in the void. Earth, how quaint. Honored council members, Velterran began, his voice carrying the aristocratic drawl that marked him as Keth'mori nobility. Allow me to present our latest acquisition. He gestured toward the rotating planet with barely concealed amusement. The third planet of the Sol system, inhabited by a species that calls itself humans. General Nexvara leaned forward, her crimson scales catching the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. What makes these creatures worthy of our attention, Commander? Surely they cannot pose any threat to the Keth'mori Empire. Velterran's laugh was a sound like grinding stone. Threat? My dear General, these beings are about as threatening as a Zorbian slug. No, they interest me precisely because they are so pathetically weak. He manipulated the hologram, zooming in on various human settlements. Look at them. Soft pink skin with no natural armor, weak little limbs that can barely lift their own body weight, and they live for what, 80 rotations at most. They are practically gift-wrapped slaves. The council murmured appreciatively. Sub-Commander Krixnal, ever eager to please his superiors, spoke up. What of their technology, Commander? Our scouts reported some form of kinetic weaponry. Ah, yes, their weapons. Velterran could barely contain his glee. This is where it gets truly amusing, my friends. These humans still use projectile weapons. Projectile weapons. Can you believe it? They stuff explosive powder into metal tubes and launch tiny metal fragments at each other. It is like watching children play with sticks and stones. The chamber erupted in hissing laughter. Even the usually stoic war chief Keth'mori allowed himself a chuckle that sounded like a landslide. Here is my proposal, Velterran continued, his eyes gleaming with malicious intelligence. We offer them a trade agreement. We will graciously provide them with weapons from our own glorious past, specifically the projectile weapons our ancestors abandoned 3,000 cycles ago when we developed plasma technology. General Nexvara tilted her massive head. Why waste even outdated weapons on such inferior beings? Because, my brilliant colleague, it will make them feel important. These humans have an amusing trait called pride. If we simply crush them outright, we will have billions of broken slaves who die from despair before they can mine a single crystal. But if we make them think they are trading with equals, Velterran's grin revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. They will work themselves to death trying to prove their worth. Sub-Commander Krixnal was practically vibrating with excitement. Brilliant, Commander. Give them weapons that cannot possibly harm our forces. Let them think they have some measure of power, and then put them to work in the Kepler mining colonies. Precisely. Our plasma shields can stop their primitive bullets as easily as deflecting raindrops. Meanwhile, they will extract rare minerals from those deadly mining worlds that even our war prisoners refuse to work. The radiation alone should keep them motivated to work quickly. War Chief Keth'mori rumbled his approval. An elegant solution. Use their weakness against them while making them grateful for the privilege. Velterran savored the moment. In 300 cycles of conquest, he had never encountered a species so perfectly designed for exploitation. These humans would provide the Keth'mori Empire with decades of cheap labor, and all it would cost them was a few crates of obsolete weapons that belonged in a museum. Prepare the diplomatic vessel, he commanded. Let us go introduce ourselves to our new business partners. 2 weeks later, Velterran stood in the main docking bay of the Imperial flagship, watching the most pathetic excuse for a spacecraft he had ever seen lumber toward their docking clamps. The human vessel looked like someone had welded together scrap metal and hoped for the best. Its hull was covered in what appeared to be paint, actual paint instead of bioluminescent coating or energy shielding. How delightfully primitive. Commander, Sub-Commander Krixnal approached with barely contained glee. The human delegation has arrived for our negotiations. The airlock hissed open, and 3 humans stepped through. Velterran had to suppress a laugh. They were even more ridiculous in person than the holographic recordings had suggested. The first one, apparently their leader, was a male with graying fur on his head and face. Behind him walked a female with dark skin and suspicious eyes, and finally a younger male who kept looking around with wide-eyed wonder. "Greetings," the lead human said, extending his hand in some sort of primitive gesture. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. This is Tactical Officer Nina Vasquez and Engineer Bobby Chen." Vel'Taran stared at the extended hand with amusement. "How quaint. I am Commander Vel'Taran of the Keth'mori Imperial Fleet. Welcome aboard the Deathbringer." The human called Morrison lowered his hand, seemingly unbothered by the snub. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Commander. We are honored by your invitation to discuss trade relations." "Indeed. Please follow me to the demonstration chamber. I believe you will find our proposal most enlightening." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Vel'Taran noticed the humans constantly looking around, taking in every detail. The female, Vasquez, seemed particularly interested in the weapon emplacements and shield generators. How adorable! They were trying to gather intelligence with their primitive senses. In the demonstration chamber, Vel'Taran gestured toward a display case containing various weapons. "These are samples of our current military technology." He picked up a plasma rifle, its energy core humming with barely contained power. This particular weapon can vaporize a 2-meter-thick wall of reinforced titanium in a single discharge. The humans exchanged glances. Morrison stepped forward. "Impressive. May I ask what kind of range and rate of fire it has?" "Of course. Maximum effective range is approximately 3 kilometers, with a sustained rate of fire limited only by the operator's endurance." Vel'Taran fired the weapon at a target across the chamber. The blast of superheated plasma struck the metal target, turning it into a puddle of molten slag in seconds. Engineer Chen whistled low. "That is significant firepower." "Now," Vel'Taran continued, thoroughly enjoying himself, "let us examine your weapons." He gestured dismissively toward the projectile rifles the humans had brought. "I understand these use some form of chemical propulsion?" Morrison nodded. "Gunpowder-based kinetic projectiles. They have served us well." Vel'Taran picked up one of the human weapons, surprised by its weight. How substantial. And the effective range. "Depending on the ammunition and environmental conditions, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 meters, Vasquez replied. "Fascinating. And the projectile velocity?" "Roughly 800 to 1,200 meters per second, Chen added. Vel'Taran nodded patronizingly. "Admirable for such primitive technology. However, I think you will find our offer quite generous." He gestured toward another display case, this one containing weapons that looked remarkably similar to the human designs, but clearly more advanced. "These are kinetic weapons from our own military history. Similar to your designs, but refined through centuries of Keth'mori engineering." The humans approached the display case with obvious interest. Morrison examined one of the rifles closely. "The craftsmanship is remarkable. These appear to be significantly more advanced than our current weapons." "Indeed. Superior metallurgy, improved ammunition design, enhanced accuracy and reliability. Consider them a gesture of goodwill between our peoples." Vel'Taran's voice dripped with false generosity. "In exchange, we merely ask for your assistance with some mining operations on a few outer rim planets." The humans huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. Vel'Taran strained to listen but could only catch fragments. Something about acceptable terms and mutual benefit. Finally, Morrison turned back to face him. "We accept your generous offer, Commander. When do we begin?" "Perfect." Vel'Taran barely managed to contain his satisfaction. "Immediately. We have prepared transportation to the Kepler 442 billion mining facility. The work there is challenging, but I am confident your species will find it suitably motivating." As the humans were escorted away, Sub-Commander Crix now approached with obvious admiration. "Masterfully done, Commander. They actually seemed grateful for the opportunity. Velteran watched the human shuttle depart, carrying its cargo of doomed laborers toward their new prison. Almost too easy, really. Sometimes I wonder if conquest is becoming too simple for beings of our obvious superiority. How wrong he was about to be. 3 months later, Security Chief Zach Moth stared at his datapad with the expression of someone who had just watched mathematics itself have a nervous breakdown. The mining reports from Kepler 442 billion they were impossible. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, his scarred hide rippling with confusion. He tapped the display again, hoping the numbers would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They did not. The humans were not just meeting their mining quotas. They were exceeding them by 300%. Zach Moth had overseen mining operations on 17 different worlds, using everything from Vraxian war prisoners to cybernetically enhanced Thari slaves. None of them had ever achieved numbers like this. The humans were supposed to be dying in droves from the radiation, the toxic atmosphere, and the sheer impossibility of extracting rare crystals from solid rock using primitive projectile weapons. Instead, they were thriving. "Computer, connect me to mining station supervisor Gex Loth," Zach Moth growled. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the worried face of a mid-level Keth'mori overseer. Gex Loth's normally pristine scales were dulled with stress, and his eye stalks twitched nervously. "Security Chief. Thank the ancestors you called. I have been trying to reach headquarters for weeks, but my reports keep getting flagged as unlikely. Explain these productivity numbers, Supervisor. Are the humans using some form of prohibited technology?" Gex Loth's laugh had a distinctly hysterical edge. "Prohibited technology? Security Chief, they are using bullets. But not in any way our tactical manuals ever anticipated. Elaborate." "Well, for starters, they figured out that if you fire a high-velocity round at precisely the right angle into a crystal vein, the impact creates microfractures that make the entire section collapse in a controlled manner. What used to take our plasma mining teams 6 hours to extract, they can bring down in minutes." Zach Moth felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "They are using kinetic weapons for precision mining?" "That is just the beginning, Security Chief. Yesterday I watched Engineer Chen take apart 3 of their rifles, extract the gunpowder from the ammunition, and create shape charges for tunnel boring. Shape charges. From gunpowder. They cleared a new mining shaft in 4 hours that would have taken our engineering teams 2 weeks with proper equipment." The datapad in Zach Moth's claws began to crack under the pressure of his grip. "Continue." "They have turned their weapons into tools, Security Chief. I have seen them use rifle barrels as precision drilling equipment, firing single rounds to create perfectly spaced anchor points for their mining platforms. They disassemble their ammunition to create explosives, lubricants, and even improvised welding compounds. And their casualty rates?" Gex Loth's eye stalks drooped. "That is the truly disturbing part, Security Chief. 0 fatalities. 0 serious injuries. They have somehow figured out how to work in conditions that killed 40% of our Thari slaves within the first month." Zach Moth stood up so abruptly that his chair toppled backward. 0 casualties? On Kepler 442 billion? That is impossible. I thought so too, Security Chief. But then I observed their work patterns. They rotate shifts to minimize radiation exposure. They use their projectile weapons to collapse unstable tunnel sections before anyone enters them. They have even figured out how to create makeshift atmospheric processors using components from their rifles and mining equipment. Atmospheric processors? Captain Morrison somehow realized that by venting the combustion gases from their weapons through a filtration system made from mining filters, they could create breathable air pockets in the deepest mine shafts. They are working in areas where even our environmental suits would fail. Zach Moth began pacing, his massive frame casting shifting shadows across the communication chamber. This was all wrong. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, easily broken. They were not supposed to be innovative. What about security? Are they attempting to escape? Gexloth's nervous laugh returned. Security chief, they have not even tested the perimeter defenses. They seem perfectly content to continue mining. In fact, they have requested additional ammunition shipments. Additional ammunition? They claim they need more gunpowder for their mining operations. Tactical Officer Vasquez submitted a formal requisition for let me check 50,000 rounds of mixed ammunition types, along with detailed specifications for primer compounds and propellant grain sizes. The implications hit Zach Moth like a plasma blast to the face. The humans were not just using their weapons creatively. They were learning, adapting, turning every limitation into an advantage. Supervisor, I want detailed surveillance recordings of all human activities. Everything. How they eat, how they sleep, how they organize their work crews. And Gexloth. Yes, security chief? Do not send those ammunition shipments without my direct authorization. As the communication ended, Zach Moth stared at the productivity reports with growing unease. In 300 cycles of conquest, he had never encountered a species that could turn weakness into strength so efficiently. The humans were supposed to be broken by now, begging for mercy, dying in the toxic mines of Kepler 442 billion. Instead, they were turning Kepler 442 billion into the most productive mining operation in Keth'mori space. And they were doing it with weapons the Empire had considered obsolete for 3,000 years. For the first time in his military career, Security Chief Zach Moth felt something he had never experienced before when dealing with conquered species. Fear. 6 weeks after Zach Moth's disturbing conversation with Supervisor Gexloth, the security alarms on Kepler 442 billion began screaming at 0347 station time. What followed was not an escape attempt. It was a masterclass in tactical humiliation that would be studied in Keth'mori military academies for generations, assuming there were any academies left after word of this got out. Security Chief Zach Moth materialized in the command center via emergency transport, his scales still shifting from sleep mode coloration to full alert crimson. Report. Commander Fluxcari, the station's military supervisor, stood frozen before a tactical display that showed absolute chaos. Security Chief, the humans they have broken containment. All sections. Simultaneously. How many casualties among our forces? That is the problem, sir. 0 casualties. But also 0 functional security stations. Zach Moth stared at the tactical display, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. Every security checkpoint was marked in red, but not due to battle damage. They were listed as operationally compromised through non-lethal methods. Explain non-lethal methods, Commander. Fluxcari's voice cracked with disbelief. Sir, they booby-trapped our own positions. Security Station Alpha 7's entire garrison is currently trapped behind a collapsed corridor that the humans somehow brought down with precisely placed gunpowder charges. The structural damage is minimal, but the debris blockage will take hours to clear. And the other stations? Security Station Beta 3 has been filled with some kind of smoke grenades made from their ammunition. Our sensors show the guards are alive but completely incapacitated by what appears to be concentrated tear gas extracted from their weapon components. Station Gamma 2. Fluxcari paused, his embarrassment palpable. Station Gamma 2's entire security team is locked in their own holding cells. The humans somehow reversed the electronic locks using components from their mining equipment. Zach Moth felt a migraine beginning to pulse behind his optical sensors. Where are the humans now? That is where it gets truly disturbing. Security Chief. They are not running. They are advancing. In formation. Led by Captain Morrison, and they are systematically neutralizing our defenses using tactics I have never seen before. The main display shifted to show security footage from Corridor Delta 9. Zach Moth watched in horrified fascination as Captain Morrison crouched behind makeshift cover, holding one of the primitive kinetic weapons. Instead of firing directly at the security team blocking the corridor, Morrison aimed at the wall. The bullet ricocheted off the metal surface at a precise angle, struck the opposite wall, bounced again, and struck the control panel for the security team's energy barriers. The barriers flickered and died, leaving the Keth'mori guards exposed and confused. "He calculated a double ricochet shot," Zach Moth whispered, "while under fire, in a combat situation." Before the security team could recover, Tactical Officer Vasquez appeared from a side corridor, rolled something that looked like a modified mining charge down the hallway, and vanished back into cover. The explosion was not large enough to cause serious injury, but the concussion and flash left the guards disoriented long enough for the humans to advance past them. "They are not trying to kill our forces," Flux Carey observed with something approaching admiration. "They are neutralizing them with surgical precision." The display switched to another camera, showing Engineer Chen leading a group of humans through the manufacturing section. Instead of weapons, they carried mining equipment that had been modified. Chen wielded what appeared to be a drilling laser powered by components stripped from their kinetic weapons. Behind him, other humans carried improvised tools that defied classification. "Sir," a communications technician called out, his voice high with panic. "We are receiving a transmission from the human group. They are requesting permission to speak with Station Command." Zach Moth's laugh had no humor in it. "They want to negotiate, while actively overrunning our facility? Should I respond, Security Chief? Put them through." Captain Morrison's voice came through the speakers with infuriating calm. "Security Chief Zach Moth, I presume." "I am Captain Morrison. We need to talk. You are in the middle of assaulting a Keth'mori military installation, human. The time for talking has passed." "Actually, sir, we are in the middle of a controlled withdrawal with equipment acquisition. There is a significant difference. We have taken great care to ensure zero casualties among your personnel, but that restraint becomes more difficult to maintain the longer this situation continues." "Equipment acquisition?" Zach Moth checked the security displays. The humans were not just escaping. They were systematically looting technology, weapons, and ships. "You are stealing Imperial property." Morrison's voice carried a hint of amusement. "We prefer to think of it as delayed compensation for exceeded performance metrics. Our mining productivity was triple the contracted amount. We are simply collecting our bonus." On the display, Zach Moth watched in horror as humans loaded stolen Keth'mori technology onto commandeered transport vessels. They moved with military precision, covering each other's movements, establishing overlapping fields of fire, and maintaining perfect communication discipline. "This is impossible," Commander Flux Carey muttered. "They are using standard Imperial squad tactics. How do they know our military protocols?" The answer hit Zach Moth like a plasma torpedo. "Because they have been watching us, learning from us. For 3 months, they have been observing every aspect of our operations while we thought they were just mining." Morrison's voice continued. "Security Chief, we have disabled your long-range communications array, but we have not destroyed it. Once we have departed, you will be able to contact your superiors and explain how a group of primitive humans with obsolete weapons managed to neutralize a fully equipped Keth'mori military installation without killing a single soldier." The tactical display showed the last human transport lifting off from the station's docking bay. The humans had not just escaped. They had stolen 3 Keth'mori frigates, 2 shuttlecraft, approximately 40% of the station's advanced weaponry, and all of the rare crystal stockpiles they had mined. "Security Chief," Morrison's voice came through one final time, "you might want to tell Commander Velterran that his business partners are renegotiating the terms of their contract. We will be in touch." The communication cut off, leaving Zach Moth staring at a facility that had been systematically dismantled by beings he had considered barely above animals. In the silence that followed, Commander Flux Carey spoke the words that every Keth'mori in the chamber was thinking but afraid to voice. "Sir, what exactly have we unleashed?" 6 months later, Commander Velterran stood before the Imperial War Council, his once pristine scales now dulled with stress and his aristocratic composure cracked like old armor. The holographic star map before him was peppered with red warning indicators, each one representing another humiliating defeat at the hands of the primitive humans. Honored Council, Vel Taran began, his voice lacking its former confidence. I present the current tactical situation regarding the human insurgency. General Nexvara leaned forward, her crimson scales now bearing visible scars from a recent encounter with human forces. Insurgency? Commander, these creatures have attacked 17 of our installations, captured 8 frigates, and somehow convinced 3 of our allied species to switch sides. This is not an insurgency. This is a nightmare. Sub-Commander Krixnal, who had been so eager to please 6 months ago, now looked like he wanted to crawl under the war table. Sir, perhaps we should explain how they are accomplishing these impossible victories. Vel Taran manipulated the holographic display, showing the wreckage of what had once been the Imperial Supply Station Omega Prime. This was our most heavily defended logistics hub in the Outer Rim. 500 soldiers, automated defense systems, orbital plasma cannons. The humans took it with a force of 60 individuals. Poor Chief Keth'mori rumbled ominously. How? They combined their primitive kinetic weapons with our own stolen technology in ways our tactical computers cannot predict or counter. Vel Taran's admission tasted like defeat. Engineer Chen has created hybrid weapons that use projectile ammunition to deliver concentrated plasma charges. The kinetic impact bypasses our energy shields, while the plasma payload devastates our armor. The display shifted to show captured weapon schematics. What the humans had created looked like an unholy fusion of Keth'mori engineering and primitive human ingenuity. Plasma chambers fitted to projectile casings, kinetic accelerators powered by stolen energy cores, and guidance systems that turned simple bullets into precision-guided nightmares. But the weapons are not the worst part, Vel Taran continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It is their tactics. They do not fight like any species we have ever encountered. General Nexvara gestured impatiently. Explain. They booby-trap their own positions. After they abandon a captured facility, they leave behind what appear to be hasty fortifications. When our forces move to reclaim the position, we discover that every defensive structure has been rigged with explosives, every weapon emplacement has been sabotaged, and every computer terminal has been programmed to release debilitating gas when accessed. Sub-Commander Krixnal shuddered visibly. Last week, Beta Squadron spent 4 hours clearing what they thought was an abandoned human camp. When they finally declared it secure and established their command post, Tactical Officer Vasquez's voice came through the communication system. What did she say? She thanked them for testing the security systems and informed them that they were now sitting in the middle of a minefield controlled by remote detonation. Then she offered to negotiate their safe passage in exchange for the ammunition supplies they had brought with them. War Chief Keth'mori's rumble turned into an angry growl. Did they negotiate? They had no choice, sir. The humans had turned their own supply run into a hostage situation without firing a single shot. Vel Taran brought up another display, showing shipping routes across Keth'mori space. Nearly half of them were marked with warning indicators. They have weaponized our own logistics network against us. Captain Morrison somehow acquired our shipping schedules and convoy routes. They do not attack our supply ships. Instead, they intercept them, treat our crews with perfect courtesy, and offer to trade supplies. Trade? Medical supplies for ammunition, food rations for weapon components. They have convinced dozens of our transport crews that cooperation is more profitable than resistance. Some of our own logistics officers are now voluntarily providing the humans with intelligence in exchange for what they call preferred trading partner status. The council sat in stunned silence. General Nexvara finally spoke, her voice hollow. They have turned commerce into warfare. Then, it gets worse, Vel Taran continued, though he was not sure how anything could be worse than what he had already revealed. They are psychological warfare specialists. Vasquez has been broadcasting surrender terms across our military communication networks. Surrender terms? She offers individual Keth'mori soldiers opportunities to defect. not to join the human cause, but to simply go home. She provides detailed information about each soldier's family, their home planet, their personal concerns. She makes defection sound like a vacation opportunity rather than treason. Sub-Commander Krixnall pulled up a datapad with trembling claws. Last week alone, we lost 300 soldiers to voluntary departure. They were not captured. They were not coerced. They simply left. Vasquez somehow convinced them that fighting humans was not worth missing their offspring's hatching ceremonies. But War Chief Keth'mori stood abruptly, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. This is impossible. How does she know about our soldiers' personal lives? Velteran's answer was barely audible. Because they have been monitoring our communications, our personnel files, our social networks. For 6 months, while we thought we were hunting them, they have been studying us. They know more about our military structure than our own intelligence services. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing a tactical analysis that made Velteran's blood run cold. Red lines connected human attack patterns, supply acquisitions, and recruitment activities across 17 star systems. The pattern was not random. It was methodical, intelligent, and absolutely terrifying. Honored Council, Velteran said, his voice finally admitting the truth he had been avoiding for months. We made a fundamental error in our assessment of the human species. They are not primitive. They are not weak. They are not victims waiting to be exploited. He paused, looking each council member in the eye. They are adaptive predators, and we have given them everything they need to hunt us. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of General Nexvara's claws scraping against the war table as she contemplated the implications of their situation. Finally, War Chief Keth'mori asked the question they were all thinking. Commander, what do you recommend? Velteran stared at the tactical display, watching the red indicators spread across their territory like a plague. I recommend we pray to the ancestors that Captain Morrison is in a negotiating mood when he arrives at our home system. When he arrives? Sub-Commander Krixnall's voice cracked. You think he is coming here? Velteran's laugh had no humor left in it. Krixnall, they have been coming here since the day we first underestimated them. We just did not realize it yet. 3 weeks later, the Keth'mori home system's early warning sensors detected the approaching human fleet, and what they saw made absolutely no sense according to every military manual ever written. Commander Velteran stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Dominance, staring at a tactical display that showed 47 vessels approaching their most heavily defended star system. 43 of those vessels were Keth'mori ships. Sir, Communications Officer Tren Void reported with barely controlled hysteria. We are receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. It appears to be the captured frigate Storm's Edge. Put it through. Captain Morrison's voice filled the bridge, sounding remarkably cheerful for someone about to engage the entire Keth'mori home fleet. Good morning, Commander Velteran. I hope you have been well. We would like to request permission to dock and discuss terms for a mutually beneficial resolution to our current disagreement. Velteran's response came out as more of a snarl than words. You arrive at our home system with a fleet of stolen ships and request permission to dock? Human, your arrogance is exceeded only by your stupidity. Actually, Commander, if you check your tactical analysis, you will notice that none of our weapons are currently powered. We are not here to attack. We are here to negotiate. Velteran quickly checked the sensor readings. Morrison was correct. Every human vessel showed powered-down weapon systems and open communication channels. It was either the most elaborate trap in military history or the most audacious diplomatic mission ever attempted. Sir, Tactical Officer Vexnar called out, the human fleet is maintaining perfect formation, but they are broadcasting surrender codes on all frequencies. Surrender codes? Not their surrender codes, sir. Ours. They are transmitting the specific surrender protocols for every ship class in our fleet. The implications hit Velteran like a physical blow. The humans were not threatening to destroy the Keth'mori fleet. They were politely informing them that they already could destroy the Keth'mori fleet. and we're choosing not to as a gesture of goodwill. Commander, Morrison's voice continued, I am going to demonstrate something that I think you will find educational. Please observe your defensive grid, Section 7 Alpha. On the tactical display, Velterran watched in fascination as one of the human ships, a modified Keth'mori frigate, fired a single projectile toward the massive orbital defense platform protecting the system's primary shipyard. The kinetic round struck the platform's energy shield, and instead of being deflected or vaporized, it passed straight through the barrier and impacted the platform's shield generator with surgical precision. The entire defensive grid flickered and died. How? Velterran whispered. Simple physics. Commander, your energy shields are designed to stop plasma bolts and energy weapons. They are calibrated to deflect fast-moving particles with specific electromagnetic signatures. Old-fashioned kinetic projectiles do not register as threats to your defensive computers. The shields simply ignore. Morrison's lesson was not finished. Observe your escort frigates, Commander. Velterran watched in horror as every Keth'mori vessel in the defensive formation suddenly went dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply offline. Tactical Officer Vasquez has been broadcasting very specific electromagnetic pulses on frequencies that your military communication networks use for emergency shutdowns. Your ships are not broken, Commander. They are simply taking a nap. This is impossible. This is what happens when you give weapons to a species and then spend 6 months teaching them exactly how your technology works. We have been excellent students, Commander. On the tactical display, Engineer Chen's modifications to the human fleet became apparent. Every captured Keth'mori vessel had been fitted with hybrid weapon systems that combined kinetic projectiles with energy technology. But more than that, they had been equipped with systems that could interface directly with Keth'mori networks, turning their own technology into a weapon against them. You see, Commander, Morrison continued, his voice taking on a professorial tone, you made a fundamental error in understanding what makes humans dangerous. You thought our weapons were primitive. You thought our tactics were crude. You thought our technology was inferior. They are. No, Commander, they are different, and difference, when properly applied, becomes advantage. You gave us kinetic weapons because you thought they were obsolete. But kinetic weapons have properties that energy weapons do not. They are simple, reliable, and completely invisible to defensive systems designed to stop advanced technology. Velterran felt the last of his aristocratic composure crumble. What do you want, human? We want what we have always wanted, Commander. A fair trade agreement. The difference is that now we are negotiating from a position of equality rather than from a position of assumed inferiority. You call this equality. You have disabled our entire defensive fleet. Morrison's laugh was genuinely amused. Commander, if we wanted to destroy your fleet, we would have done so already. Instead, we have simply demonstrated that the option exists. There is a significant difference between capability and intent. Then what are your terms? We return all captured vessels and technology. We provide you with detailed technical specifications for our hybrid weapon systems. We establish formal diplomatic relations between our species. And in return, you treat us as partners rather than as potential slaves. Velterran stared at the tactical display, trying to find some angle, some advantage, some way to salvage Keth'mori pride from this situation. There was none. And if we refuse, then we leave. And in 6 months, when your enemies discover that your defensive technology can be defeated by weapons they abandoned centuries ago, you will wish you had accepted our partnership. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the quiet desperation of a military commander who had just learned that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. There is one thing I must know, human, Velterran said finally. Did you know? When we first gave you those weapons, did you know they were outdated? Morrison's pause was answer enough, but he provided words anyway. We studied your technology for 3 months before we ever met. We knew exactly what you were offering and exactly why you were offering it. The question we had to answer was not whether we could defeat your weapons with ours. The question was whether we could defeat your thinking with ours. And? Well, Commander, you tell me. Who won? Velteron looked around his bridge, at his disabled fleet, at his compromised defenses, even at the tactical situation that had turned from absolute advantage to complete helplessness in the span of a single conversation. You did, Captain Morrison. You won the moment you realized that the most dangerous weapon in any conflict is not technology. It is the mind that wields it. Exactly. Now, shall we discuss that trade agreement? And for the first time in 300 cycles of conquest, the Keth'mori Empire found themselves negotiating with equals. They discovered, much to their surprise, that they preferred it that way.